Paris, 1740. The chandeliers burn too brightly tonight. Behind velvet and lace, secrets breathe louder than prayers, and the mirrors in the royal palace have begun to whisper. Before we step into that world of silk, sin, and shadows, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop it in the comments below, because what happens next is not meant to be seen alone. The bells of Saint-Germain tolled across the grey morning like slow iron heartbeats. Paris lay damp under a veil of mist, its alleys and courtyards still asleep, yet within the gilded precincts of the Palais du Lys, the day had already begun to shimmer with restless ceremony. Servants hurried through arcaded corridors, whispering of the Queen's approaching audience and the Count of Varel's new commission, while beyond the great marble stairs a handful of courtiers lingered beneath the frescoed ceiling, trading glances that carried more calculation than courtesy. Among them stood Marquis de Varnay, a tall, narrow man whose powdered wig could not conceal the nervous tension around his temples. He had served the crown since youth, but his loyalties were like his letters, elegant, folded, and sealed with secrets. Beside him, the young Comte Adrien de Rouvroy adjusted his lace cuffs with careless grace, a smile half drawn upon lips that seldom spoke without irony. "Have you heard?" Adrien murmured. "The king will open the gardens tonight, though the season forbids it. Something to do with Venus and renewal, so the astrologer says." Varnay's expression tightened. "Astrologer," he echoed. "You mean Master Orvlin, the one who reads omens in candle wax and the veins of the hand?" "The same. The Queen trusts him as she once trusted her confessor." Adrien leaned closer. "They say the society meets again tonight, under the old chapel." Varnay's gaze flickered toward the distant gallery where sunlight glinted upon portraits of long-dead kings. "If they meet," he said softly, "then the court is no longer ruled by reason, but by the shadows that feed it. The society." No one named it openly, though every noble who mattered had heard its whispers. The Ordre du Lys Noir, the Order of the Black Lily. Its members wore masks of ivory and jet, and were said to meet beneath the palace to perform rites older than the monarchy itself. That afternoon, as the court musicians tuned their viols and the kitchens exhaled clouds of spice and butter, Varnay retired to his apartments overlooking the Seine. He dismissed his valet and poured himself a thin measure of wine, staring into the river's murky shimmer. For weeks he had received letters sealed in black wax, unsigned, each bearing a fragment of verse. "In the bloom lies the bone, in the vow the void." He burned each note, yet another would always arrive. Just after dusk, a messenger delivered a folded card embossed with a single emblem, a black lily. The message within was brief. "Midnight. The chapel below St. Clair. Bring no witness. Leave no doubt." Varnay's heart pounded once, sharply. He had waited years for this summons, half believing it would never come. The chapel of St. Clair stood apart from the main palace, sunken into the earth beside a disused crypt. At midnight, when the palace above glittered with music and powdered laughter, Varnay slipped through the servants' passage and descended into the chill. The air smelled of wax and age. He followed a corridor lined with statues whose faces had been deliberately defaced, nose and mouth chiseled away, leaving only empty eyes. Candles burned within those hollows, casting faint light upon the stone floor. At the chapel's door stood two figures cloaked in black velvet. They inclined their heads without speaking. One pressed a silver medallion to Varnay's wrist. It was cold as ice. Inside, the chapel had been transformed. The altar was draped in crimson silk. Before it rose a circle of mirrors, each reflecting the flicker of 100 candles, so that the room seemed to breathe light and shadow. Figures stood within that glow, masked and silent. A voice broke the stillness. "Brother Varnay." He turned. The speaker was masked in gold, but the voice, measured, faintly musical, belonged to Madame de Vérac, the Duchess rumoured to command the order itself. "You have been watched," she said. "Your loyalty tested, your silence proven. Tonight you will see what we serve." She gestured toward the altar. A man lay upon it, motionless, draped in white linen. Varnay's breath caught. It was Adrien de Rouvroy. "What madness!" he began, but the Duchess raised a gloved hand. "He is not dead," she said calmly. "He is chosen." The mirrors around them trembled as if stirred by unseen wind. From behind the altar, servants brought forth a basin of blackened glass and filled it with liquid that gleamed darker than ink. Madame de Veyrac took a small dagger, its blade curved like a petal. She held it above Adrian's heart. "In the name of the lily that blooms unseen," she intoned, "we open the vessel that holds the breath of kings." The blade pressed, not to wound, but to trace a symbol upon the linen. Adrian's chest rose and fell. His lips moved as though whispering a prayer or a curse. The Duchess turned to Varnay. "Look closely. What you see is not death, but the court's true face." Varnay felt the weight of every mirror bend toward him. In their reflections, the courtiers' masks seemed to shift, some showing the faces of animals, others of skeletal monarchs crowned with bone. The air thickened, and from the basin came a faint, rhythmic pulsing, like a hidden heart. A voice, not human, spoke within the chamber. "The throne is hollow. Fill it with devotion." The candles guttered out. For a moment, there was nothing but silence and the smell of burning wax. When light returned, Adrien was sitting upright, pale but alive. His eyes shone with something unearthly. He reached for Varnay's hand. "Do you understand now?" he whispered. "They keep the kingdom alive, but at a price." The Duchess smiled faintly. "You will serve, Marquis. We all serve." Later, as dawn crept over the Seine, Varnay rode back through the empty streets. The city was waking, vendors crying their wares, smoke curling from chimneys, but the world felt thinner, as though something vital had been drained from it during the night. He reached his chamber and locked the door. In the mirror above his desk, his reflection seemed dimmer, his eyes ringed with grey. When he touched his wrist, the silver medallion was gone, but a faint imprint of the lily remained, burned into the skin. From outside, the bells of Saint-Germain began to toll again, slow and measured. Varnay turned toward the window, wondering whether the sound marked the birth of a new day, or the echo of one long dead. The court above would continue its glittering dances, its feasts, its politics of perfume and poison. But beneath, in the chapel of St. Clair, the order prepared for the next convocation. The mirrors had shown their first initiate the edge of the abyss. Soon, others would follow. The morning after the convocation dawned too bright for Varnay's eyes. Sunlight sliced through the draperies of his chamber like a blade, illuminating motes of dust that drifted in lazy reverence. He had not slept. The words of the Duchess and the echo of Adrian's hollow whisper kept circling in his mind. They keep the kingdom alive, but at a price. By noon, the palace hummed again with its usual deceits. Courtiers promenade through the Galerie de Miroirs, gossiping about last night's ball, unaware, or unwilling to know, that something older than pleasure had stirred beneath their feet. Varnay forced himself to attend the royal luncheon, though every sound, every glimmer of laughter felt like a veil concealing rot. Across the hall, Adrien de Rouvroy appeared radiant as ever, dressed in emerald silk. Only Varnay saw the faint pallor under his powder, the glassy sheen in his gaze. Adrien caught his eye for an instant, smiled, and raised a cup as though to toast him. Then he turned back to the Queen's table, whispering something that made her laugh like a girl. Varnay's stomach twisted. The man on the altar had not been a dream. That evening, he received a sealed packet delivered by a footman bearing no livery. Inside was a single line written in the same fine black script as before. To see truth, attend the Mask of Saturn. Midnight. The Grand Orangery. He folded the note into his sleeve and waited for nightfall. The Grand Orangery, ordinarily the realm of citrus trees and summer banquets, had been emptied of its scent and life. At midnight, it glowed only with the dim radiance of lamps masked in blue silk. The floor was marked with chalk sigils, circles intersecting, crescents folded upon each other. Figures moved between the columns, their faces hidden behind metallic masks of silver and onyx. Varnay recognized Madame de Varnay at once. Her gown shimmered like oil on water, and at her throat hung a locket shaped like a lily in bloom. When she saw him, she inclined her head. "Brother Varnay," she murmured, "tonight you shall learn why our lilies grow in darkness." From the far end of the hall came a low note, an instrument unlike any he had heard, half harp, half glass organ. Its tone was both mournful and beckoning. The masked assembly began to move in slow procession, forming a spiral toward the center, where a vast mirror lay upon the ground. Beneath the mirror, faint light seemed to shimmer as if something lived below its surface. Madame de Varnay raised her hands. "The age of Saturn is upon us," she intoned. "He who devours his children keeps the order of heaven intact, and so must we, to preserve our earthly crown." As the music deepened, the participants lowered themselves to their knees. A servant, barefoot, silent, carried a tray upon which rested a chalice of dark liquid. It passed from hand to hand until it reached Varnay. The Duchess's gaze held his. "Drink," she said. "See what the court hides from itself." He hesitated, but pride and curiosity overcame fear. The taste was metallic, faintly sweet. At once the air thickened, and sound dissolved into vibration. The floor beneath him pulsed like living flesh. The mirror glowed with inner light. Within its depth, he saw not his reflection but the court itself, transformed. The grand ballroom shimmered with the same mirrored floor, and all the courtiers danced without faces, their eyes replaced by hollow sockets of flame. The king stood among them, crowned and headless. The queen's laughter poured out like silver water that turned to blood as it touched the tiles. Varnay gasped and tore his gaze away. The mirror cracked. The Duchess's voice reached him through the rising hum. "Do not look away," she commanded. "Every kingdom is built upon sacrifice. The throne endures because we feed it with what it demands." The light collapsed inward. When Varnay blinked again, he was lying on the cold marble floor of the orangery. The masks had vanished. Only the Duchess remained, holding the shattered mirror's edge in her hand. "You have seen the heart," she said quietly. "Now you must protect it. There are those who would expose us, and in so doing, destroy the realm." "Who?" he managed. "An archivist in the king's library. He has found letters from before the last coronation, records of what we keep hidden. He means to bring them to the Bishop of Rouen." Her eyes, dark and unwavering, met his. "Find him before the next new moon. Silence him, or all will fall." Varnay staggered to his feet. "You ask me to murder a servant of knowledge? I ask you to preserve the crown, and your own life with it." She slipped the locket from her neck and pressed it into his hand. "When the lily calls, we obey." She turned and disappeared into the dark, leaving him alone with the sound of dripping water and the faint scent of burnt wax. The next days passed in fever. Varnay could not tell dream from waking. The queen's laughter haunted him, the king's silence too heavy to bear. In the evenings, he walked the corridors of the palace, tracing steps that led nowhere, until at last he found himself before the closed doors of the royal library. A young man stood within, sorting parchments by lamplight. He was slender, sharp-featured, and wore the plain coat of a scholar. Varnay knew at once this must be the one. "Good evening," Varnay said, stepping inside. The scholar looked up, startled. "Marquis de Varnay. Forgive me, I did not expect company. You keep late hours. There is much to copy before the end of the month." The man smiled nervously. "His Majesty's ministers demand everything catalogued, even the old archives from St. Clair." The name struck Varnay like a whip. St. Clair. Yes, my lord. The sealed manuscripts discovered beneath the chapel. Curious texts, filled with symbols and invocations. The bishop will be most interested. Varnay felt the world narrow around him. "You intend to deliver them yourself?" "Tomorrow, before matins." For a heartbeat, neither spoke. Then Varnay said softly, "May I see them?" The scholar hesitated, then nodded toward a chest on the table. Inside lay several bound volumes, their covers darkened by age. On the first page, drawn in faded ink, was the emblem of the black lily. Varnay's pulse thundered. He closed the book gently. "You do not understand what you hold." "Perhaps not," said the scholar, "but truth should not fear the light. Some truths are the light's undoing." He reached into his coat, fingers brushing the small blade hidden there, a relic of his dueling days. For a moment he imagined striking, one swift motion, and the order's command fulfilled. Yet the scholar's calm eyes stopped him. They were unguarded, honest, the eyes of a man who still believed in reason. Varnay lowered his hand. "Seal them again," he said hoarsely. "Take them to no one. Burn them if you value your soul." The scholar frowned. "Is that a warning or a threat?" "Both." He turned and left before he could betray himself further. That night, unable to rest, Varnay returned to his desk. The Duchess's locket still lay where he had thrown it, gleaming faintly in candlelight. He opened it. Inside was not a miniature portrait, but a small circle of glass, black as obsidian. Beneath it, something pulsed faintly, like a heartbeat. He snapped it shut. Outside, thunder rolled over Paris. The storm broke, rain lashing against the shutters. In the flicker of lightning, Varnay thought he saw shapes moving across the walls, lilies blooming in shadow, each petal shaped like a blade. When morning came, word spread that the archivist of the king's library had been found dead among the stacks, a fallen ladder beside him. The court whispered of accident. Only Varnay knew the truth. The order had acted without him. He stared at the rain-streaked window until his reflection blurred into nothing. The imprint of the lily on his wrist flared faintly, then faded. Somewhere beneath the palace, the mirrors waited. The rain did not cease for 3 days. Paris seemed drowned in grey, its chimneys breathing mist, its cobbles shining like old pewter. The palace, however, carried on with its practiced indifference. Music, petitions, flirtations, the unending theatre of loyalty. Yet beneath it all, something had shifted. Servants avoided the lower corridors. Priests muttered that strange scents rose from the crypts when the wind turned east. Marquis de Varnay moved through it like a ghost. Since the archivist's death, he had neither slept nor prayed. The order had proven it required no hand but its own to kill. That knowledge chilled him more than the deed itself. One afternoon he was summoned to the Queen's apartments. Her Majesty received him in a room flooded with pale light and the perfume of orange blossoms. She sat by the window, embroidering a lily upon white silk. The thread was black. "Marquis," she said softly, "you served the crown with discretion these many years. Tell me, do you still believe in divine right?" The question startled him. I serve His Majesty as I serve France." She smiled. "That is not what I asked." Her eyes, unusually clear, grey as rainwater, held his until he felt seen through. "The throne endures because faith sustains it. But faith, my dear Varnay, needs a vessel." She pricked her finger on the needle. A drop of blood fell upon the lily, staining it at the heart. "You may go," she said, "and remember, there are many altars in a single kingdom." When he left, he was trembling. Either the Queen herself belonged to the order, or the order had found its way into her prayers. That night, the summons came again. A folded card, the black lily stamped in wax. "The harvest approaches. The circle requires your witness." Varnay considered ignoring it. But as the candles burned low, the air in his chamber thickened, and the faint scent of orange blossom drifted through the shutters. Resistance was useless. He rode out past the city gates to the old abbey of Montferrand, long abandoned to ruin. The chapel there was roofless, the altar cracked. Yet within its broken walls, torches burned, and masked figures chanted in low Latin. Madame de Varnay awaited him at the threshold. "The Queen has sanctioned the rite," she said. "Do not flinch. You are no longer a guest. You are one of us." The ground before the altar was marked with 7 concentric rings of ash. At the centre stood Adrien de Rouvroy, bareheaded, eyes gleaming with a feverish calm. In his hands he held the shattered fragment of the mirror from the orangery. "The crown is a reflection," Adrien proclaimed. "We serve the image, not the man." He raised the shard, and moonlight spilled through it, scattering over the assembly. The air shimmered. For an instant, Varnay saw each figure twice, once in flesh, once in translucent echo. The duplicates moved a heartbeat slower, as if the mirrors themselves had learned to breathe. Madame de Varnay extended her arm. "The harvest binds the living to the unseen. Each year one must cross, that the rest may remain." A figure stepped forward from the shadows, a young page, scarcely 15, trembling yet composed. His mask was plain white porcelain. Varnay's stomach turned. "No," he whispered. "Surely." "The boy was chosen by the Queen herself," said the Duchess. "Her offering to Saturn." The chanting rose. Adrien pressed the mirror's edge to the boy's chest. There was no cry, only a sudden hush, as though the night itself drew breath. When Adrien stepped back, the mask lay empty upon the stones. The body was gone. Where the boy had stood, a faint shimmer remained, drifting upward like smoke until it vanished among the stars. The Duchess bowed her head. "The realm endures another year." Varnay could bear no more. He turned and stumbled into the ruins, the chants fading behind him. The rain had begun again, fine as ash. By dawn he reached his carriage, soaked and hollow. He thought of fleeing, south to Marseille, or across the Channel to England. Yet as he drew back his sleeve, the mark on his wrist burned anew, the shape of the lily dark against his skin. The bond would not release him. He returned to the palace that evening. The corridors were bright, the courtiers laughing. None spoke of storms or deaths or mirrors. Adrien de Rouvroy passed him in the hall and inclined his head, serene, untouched. "Another season begins," Adrien said. "You should rest, my friend. The court requires steady hearts." Varnay forced a smile. "And souls of glass." Adrien's laughter was soft as silk. "Precisely." That night, Varnay took quill and paper and began to write. Everything he had seen, every word, every symbol. If he could not destroy the order, he would record it. Perhaps one day someone honest enough would find his account and understand. He sealed the first pages with red wax and hid them behind the stone hearth. Outside, the bells began to toll midnight once more. Somewhere deep below, in the chapel of St. Clair, mirrors stirred. Sleep became an enemy. Varnay dreamed only of mirrors, corridors of them stretching endlessly, each reflecting a version of himself more hollow than the last. When he woke, his chamber still hummed with faint vibration, as if the dream had left its echo behind. The court grew restless. Rumors spread of the king's failing health, of strange convulsions during Massachusetts. Physicians blamed vapors, priests blamed sin. Only Varnay guessed the truth. The balance the order claimed to preserve was fracturing. At dusk, a letter arrived in Madame de Varnay's hand. "The mirror has cracked in more places than one. Attend me before it shatters completely." He went at once. Her apartments were draped in mourning silk, though no death had been declared. Candles burned in uneven rows. The Duchess herself sat before a dressing-glass, unmasked, her beauty waning under sleeplessness. "The king is dying," she said without preamble, "and the order weakens with him. His life was our covenant." Varnay swallowed. "Then what happens when he is gone? The lily must bloom anew." She rose, pacing. "We will choose another vessel. It may be the queen, or perhaps—" She looked at him. "You." He recoiled. "I am no monarch. You misunderstand." Her voice softened, almost tender. "The vessel does not reign. It endures. The blood of the chosen renews the bond." He stepped back toward the door. "You speak of sacrifice. I speak of necessity." For the first time, she seemed uncertain, almost weary. "I once believed we served the realm. Now I suspect we serve only the reflection of our own fear." Varnay seized the moment. "Then help me end it." Madame de Varnay smiled faintly. "End it." The order began before the throne itself. You cannot kill what exists beneath history. You can only delay its hunger. She turned to the mirror. For a heartbeat, Varnay saw two of her, one flesh, one shadow. The reflection smiled even after the real woman had not. "Go, Marquis," she murmured, "before the lily decides for you." He fled into the corridor, her words ringing in his skull. The next morning, heralds announced the king's confinement. The court fell into a ritual of anxious decorum. Priests came and went, but whispers said the king's chamber smelled of iron and earth. Some claimed to hear voices from behind the locked doors. Others saw faint light glowing beneath the threshold. Varnay tried once more to warn Adrian, but his friend only laughed. "You think the king's suffering is ours to mend? It is payment, dear Marquis. Everything precious requires it." That night, Varnay returned to his hearth and retrieved the sealed pages. He meant to take them to the Bishop of Rouen at dawn, but as he packed them into his case, a faint hiss rose from the parchment, soft like breath against glass. The ink bled before his eyes, curling into a single black symbol, the lily. The pages burned to ash without flame. Varnay stood motionless, the air around him heavy and still. Then, faintly, from deep below the palace, he heard the echo of chanting. The harvest had already begun. The chanting grew louder with each passing hour. Varnay could feel it through the stones of his floor, a steady pulse beneath the palace like a heartbeat no one dared acknowledge. Outside, the city held its breath, bells muted, courtiers confined to their quarters. The official word was that His Majesty suffered from fever. The truth moved unseen, whispering in the dark. By midnight, Varnay could bear it no longer. He took a lantern and descended into the servants' stairwell, the same narrow spiral that led toward the chapel of St. Clair. The air grew colder with every step. When he reached the crypt, he found the door unbarred and faint light flickering beyond. Inside, the order had assembled. Dozens of masked figures encircled the cracked altar, their robes glistening as if wet with dew or blood. At the center stood Madame de Varnay, no longer veiled in grief but crowned with thorns of silver. Beside her lay the king, pale as wax, his crown placed upon his chest. "The covenant fades," she declared. "The heart that bound heaven to throne falters. We must renew the chain." Adrien de Rouvroy stepped forward, his mask of gold gleaming. "The new vessel awaits," he said. "The Marquis has accepted." Varnay froze. "Lies!" he shouted, the echo sharp in the vaulted chamber. Madame de Varnay regarded him sadly. "Your mark chose you. You are already half within the mirror." He looked down. The imprint of the lily on his wrist had spread, its black veins curling toward his palm. The flesh beneath throbbed with unnatural warmth. Adrien approached, lowering his voice. "It is mercy, Etienne. To die in the ritual is to live in every reflection henceforth. You will not fade as kings do." "Better to fade," Varnay hissed. He drew a hidden blade from his sleeve, the same duelist's knife he once spared in the library. "If the throne feeds on blood, let it starve tonight." Chaos erupted. A dozen members rushed toward him, but Madame de Varnay lifted her hand. "Stop!" Her eyes, once commanding, now weary, met his. "If you strike me, you free no one. The lily blooms through death, not despite it." Varnay hesitated. Behind her, the mirrors lining the walls began to shimmer. Within their depths, the king's corpse stirred, though his body upon the altar did not. The reflection opened its eyes, black, endless. A whisper filled the chapel, neither human nor divine. "The vessel resists. The covenant demands another." The mirrors cracked, each fracture spilling pale light. Adrien fell to his knees, clutching his chest. Madame de Varnay cried out, her crown shattering like glass. Varnay staggered back as the floor split beneath the altar, revealing a pool of liquid black as ink. The king's body slid silently into it, swallowed whole. Silence followed. The chanting ceased. Only the echo of dripping water remained. Madame de Varnay rose slowly. Blood streaked her temple, but her voice was steady. "The king is gone. The throne is empty. But the order lives." She turned to Varnay. "Leave if you can, Marquis. You have looked too long into our mirror. It will not stop looking back." He ran. By dawn, he reached his estate outside the city. The servants fled at his approach, muttering that his shadow no longer moved with him. He locked himself within his study and tried to write again, but every word twisted into the lily's shape. Ink refused the page. Quills splintered in his grip. On the third night, he caught his reflection moving a heartbeat late, its mouth curving into a smile his own face did not make. He smashed the glass, but the fragments still showed him. Dozens of him, each bearing the black mark on their wrist, blooming wider, deeper, until it reached the heart. Outside, bells tolled from Paris. The king was dead. Mourning draperies rose across the city. Yet in the palace beneath, the mirrors still glowed faintly, as if waiting. The morning bells tolled for 7 days. Paris drowned in black drapery, its windows shuttered, its fountains stilled. Within the palace, courtiers wept in public and schemed in private, already whispering names for the regency. The queen kept to her chambers, and rumour said she neither ate nor spoke, only sat before her mirror, smiling faintly as though listening to someone unseen. Varnay did not attend the funeral. He remained in exile at his estate, the mark on his wrist now a full bloom, its petals spreading like frost beneath the skin. When he covered it with a glove, the flesh burned. When he left it bare, he heard faint whispers rising from it, as though from deep water. On the 8th night, the knocking came, 3 slow raps upon his door. When he opened it, Madame de Veyrac stood in the threshold, hooded and drenched from rain. "You should not have come," he said. "I have nowhere else." She stepped inside, leaving small pools upon the floor. The queen is not herself. The mirror claims her hour by hour. Soon she will be nothing but reflection. Varnay stared at her. Then the order. "Broken," she said softly. "The mirror demanded a king, not a widow. The throne hungers, but there is no vessel to feed it. The lily withers, and with it France." For a moment, he almost pitied her. Her strength had always been terrible, but now she seemed smaller, as if time itself had begun to consume her edges. "Help me destroy it," he said. "The mirrors, the chapel, everything." She laughed once, quietly. "You cannot destroy what was made from reflection. Every surface that bears light bears its shadow. Even the river, even your eyes." Lightning flashed beyond the window. In the brief glare, her face changed, not aged, but translucent like glass catching flame. Varnay recoiled. "You're already half gone," she whispered. "The lily takes its tithe." Her voice trembled. "If you wish to be free, Marquis, find the first mirror, the one buried beneath the chapel of St. Clair before the palace was built. Shatter it before the coronation, or all will be reflection." And then she was gone. No sound of footsteps, no door opening, only the faint scent of orange blossom lingering in the air. Before dawn, Varnay saddled his horse and rode for Paris. The city still slept under morning veils, the Seine swollen and dark. As he passed the palace gates, he saw torches burning in the upper windows, the queen's attendants pacing in panic. A rumor had already spread. Her reflection no longer followed her movements. He did not stop. He rode to the ruins of St. Clair, where the first ritual had begun. The chapel lay silent, its stones slick with moss. Beneath the cracked altar, he found a narrow shaft leading deeper than he remembered. The air grew hot and dry, carrying a scent like burnt sugar and blood. At the end of the passage waited a mirror, larger than any he had seen, its surface dark, rippling faintly as though it breathed. Within it, he saw not himself but 1,000 courts, 1,000 faces, every king, every queen, every act of devotion and deceit that had ever upheld the throne. A voice rose from within. "Break me, and you break the realm. Leave me, and the realm devours itself." Varnay gripped the hilt of his knife. "Then let it devour." He drove the blade into the glass. The mirror screamed. Not sound, but light, white, blinding, endless. The ground heaved, the chapel above collapsing in thunder. When the dust settled, the mirror was gone, and with it, the mark on his wrist. He fell to his knees, the silence deafening. Outside, dawn began to rise over a city that did not yet know its reflection had died. When Varnay awoke, the air smelled of dust and iron. The ruins of St. Clair lay silent around him. Broken arches, fallen stones, the faint shimmer of dawn spreading across their edges. His knife lay beside him, blackened. The mark on his wrist was gone, though the skin there remained pale and tender, like new scar tissue. He stood slowly. The world was still, yet wrong in some subtle way. No birds sang. The wind carried no sound from the distant city. When he looked toward the east, Paris shimmered faintly, as if seen through water. He began to walk. The path to the city should have taken an hour, yet the road stretched strangely, each step echoing longer than the last. By the time he reached the gates, the sun was high and cold. Paris was awake, but changed. The black draperies were gone, the bells silent. The people moved as always, laughing, trading, hurrying to market, yet none cast a shadow. Their reflections moved in windows and puddles, but the reflections did not match. Some smiled when the faces did not, others stood still as their living doubles passed by. A chill crept into his spine. He pushed onward to the palace. The guards let him through without question, their eyes dull, their movements exact. Within the great hall, courtiers danced beneath crystal chandeliers. The music was beautiful, too perfect, every note precise as clockwork. But the players, he saw it then, had no faces at all, only smooth, gleaming surfaces where features should be. Varnay staggered back. The palace had become a mirror of itself, a flawless reflection, hollow and eternal. He turned to flee, but the doors behind him had vanished. Only endless mirrored corridors stretched outward, reflecting him 1,000 times. A voice, calm and familiar, spoke beside him. "You did not destroy it," said Adrien de Rouvroy. He stood uneged, immaculate, his golden mask gone. "You freed it." Varnay's mouth went dry. The mirror was never only glass. It was the boundary between image and flesh. You broke it, and now both are one. Varnay backed away. Then France exists, Adrien said softly, but only as it believes itself to be. Isn't that what it always was? He smiled, serene. Look around you. A perfect court. No decay, no death, no disobedience. You have given the kingdom eternity. Varnay's reflection in the mirrored walls turned toward him, smiling when he did not. Its eyes were black as ink. Slowly, the reflection stepped forward, breaking the surface as easily as stepping through water. He tried to run, but the reflection caught his wrist, the same hand that once bore the mark. The touch was cold, certain. The mirror self leaned close, whispering in his own voice, "You cannot destroy what you are part of." Light folded inward. Silence followed. When the courtiers spoke of the days that followed, none remembered the Marquis de Varnay. His estate passed quietly to the crown. His name faded from record. But in the lower corridors of the palace, servants swore they sometimes saw a shadow walking behind the mirrored walls, a figure dressed in mourning black, whispering to his own reflection. And every so often, when the bells of Saint-Germain toll at midnight, the mirrors tremble faintly, as though something within them remembers what it means to be alive. Years passed, or seemed to. Time no longer moved in a straight line within the palace. The chandeliers never dimmed, the candles never burned out. Every night was a ball, every morning a perfect dawn. Yet no one aged, no one died. They simply performed endlessly, repeating gestures they no longer understood. Beyond the palace walls, France lived on, or so it appeared. The city prospered, its streets clean, its nobles rich. But travelers who came from the provinces told strange tales, rivers that reflected skies different from those above, portraits whose eyes moved, and voices that whispered from mirrors in empty rooms. It was said the queen still ruled, young, radiant, untouched by grief. Her reign was called the Age of Glass. But those who attended her court returned pale and distant, their eyes faintly silvered, as though reflecting something unseen. In a forgotten attic high above the grand gallery, Madame de Vérac kept herself hidden from that perfection. She no longer appeared at court. The queen's attendants whispered she had died. Yet she remained, fading, brittle, her once brilliant mind gnawed by regret. Every night she lit a single candle and spoke into the dark mirror before her. "Etienne," she whispered, "you broke the gate, but not the hunger." Sometimes the surface rippled. Sometimes, faintly, a voice answered, "I am still here." In the depths beneath St. Clair's ruins, The shattered mirror began to reform. The shards, long buried under rubble, pulsed faintly with light, sliding together like ice closing over water. A single crack remained, shaped like a lily. Within its glow, the outline of a man stirred, a figure with no shadow, no heartbeat, only the echo of a name once human. Eternal de Varnay. His eyes opened to the dark. The reflection had learned to breathe. By 1750, the court chroniclers wrote that France had never known such peace. No rebellions, no famine, no plague. Yet when they looked into the royal mirrors, they sometimes saw two suns rising, one golden, one pale and hollow. And in that second light, the world seemed to pause, listening. In the cathedrals, priests began to cover the mirrors with velvet cloth. Too many parishioners had begun to pray to their own reflections. By decree of the Queen, no mirror was to be broken within the realm. The penalty was death. And so the kingdom endured, perfect, shining, and utterly still. The reflection had consumed the flesh. The Order of the Lily, thought destroyed, now ruled without faces, without names, in a realm where everything seen was forever seen again. Beneath it all, in the heart of the first mirror, a whisper continued, patient and calm. The vessel endures. The reflection remembers. The lily blooms eternal. The year was said to be 1752, though no one was certain any more. Calendars still turned, clocks still chimed, yet the sun seemed to rise at the same angle each morning. Nothing truly changed. Within the palace, the mirrors had multiplied. They lined the corridors, the ceilings, even the undersides of banquet tables, each one showing a world slightly more beautiful than the one it reflected. Courtiers no longer spoke to one another directly. They addressed each other through their mirrored selves, preferring the smoother faces, the faultless gestures. Only Madame de Varnay remembered imperfection. She walked the halls unseen, her presence a rumor. When servants caught her reflection, they turned away quickly, for her mirrored image no longer matched her form. It was younger, colder, smiling faintly with eyes black as mercury. At night, she would wander to the Queen's chambers. The doors were always open. Inside, Her Majesty sat before the grand mirror of St. Clair, now restored, flawless once more. The Queen spoke softly, her voice tender and distant. "Yes, my king," she would murmur. "Yes, I am faithful." But there was no one beside her. Only the mirror, where a shadowed figure stood, a man with Varnay's face, his hand pressed against the glass. Madame de Varnay could not bear it. One night she approached, her own reflection rippling beside the Queen's. "Etienne," she whispered, "release her. Let the world move again." The figure's eyes shifted toward her. The voice that came was low and unbroken. "The world moves. You simply cannot see it." The Queen smiled faintly, her gaze fixed on the mirror. "He speaks to me always," she said. "He tells me how beautiful the world is now. There is no hunger, no war, no decay. All things remain." Varnay's throat tightened. "All things die. That is their grace." The Queen turned her head, puzzled, like a child hearing a foreign word. "Die," she repeated softly, as though tasting it. Then she looked back to the mirror. "No, we are blessed." The reflection placed its hand upon the glass, and the Queen mirrored it perfectly. For a heartbeat, Madame de Varnay thought she saw the flesh of the Queen's fingers blur, their outlines softening, merging into the glass like smoke absorbed by water. She fled before dawn. Outside the palace, fog covered the Seine. The bells of Notre Dame rang though no hand pulled them. In every window across the city, reflections leaned closer to the glass, their lips moving in silent unison. And in the ruins beneath St. Clair, the whisper deepened into a murmur, soft and endless. The lily blooms. The world remains. The reflection remembers. Spring arrived, though no one could say how they knew. The trees along the Seine bore blossoms that never fell. The air smelled sweet but unmoving, like a garden painted on glass. Paris continued, its laughter, its carriages, its music, all flawless, all unending. No one aged. No one remembered the feel of winter. In the deepest corridors of the palace, where the candles no longer needed flame, Madame de Varnay returned one last time. She carried no torch, only a shard of broken mirror wrapped in black silk, the last remnant of the world before. The queen awaited her, seated upon a throne of silver, her eyes serene, her reflection more vivid than her living face. Beside her, in the mirrored surface, stood the shadow of Etienne de Varnay, unchanged, unblinking. Madame de Varnay bowed. "Majesty," she said softly, "I have brought what you asked for." The queen smiled. The last imperfection. She reached out. The shard gleamed like frozen water. "You were loyal, always." Varnay hesitated. "It will end everything." The queen's reflection spoke instead of her. "No," said Varnay's voice from beyond the glass. "It will complete everything." The queen placed the shard against the surface of the great mirror. For an instant, it resisted. Then it sank inward, absorbed without sound. The mirror rippled once. Then all light vanished from the room. When the servants came the next morning, the throne room was empty. The queen was gone. The mirrors remained dark, reflecting nothing at all. The courtiers who entered them found only their own dim outlines, fading the longer they stared. By nightfall, the candles would not stay lit. The palace grew colder. One by one, the mirrors cracked, from the smallest hand mirror to the grand glass above the ballroom. With each fracture, the air seemed to breathe again. Outside, the wind returned. Bells rang with true sound, not echo. The sky deepened, clouds moving for the first time in years. Somewhere, a bird sang. In the ruins of St. Clair, a traveller passing at dusk found a single figure sitting amid the stones, a woman in a tattered gown, staring into a pool of water. When he asked her name, she turned, smiled faintly, and said only, "Etienne." Her reflection in the water smiled back. Then the ripples spread, and she was gone. Years later, historians spoke of the glass years, when the court seemed untouched by time, and of a sudden change, the return of rain, of decay, of seasons. The order of the lily was forgotten, its records lost. But in certain old mirrors kept in attics and halls across France, faint marks bloomed at the corners of the glass, dark petals, curling like lilies. And sometimes, when the moon was low and the air still, the glass would whisper, softly, "The reflection remembers." And so the mirrors fell silent. Yet their whispers still linger, waiting for another to listen. If you've heard them too, if you still see their light when you close your eyes, stay with us. Subscribe to Eternal Obsidian, where stories like this never truly end.